My name is Margaret Hayes. I am 62 years old, a widow, and for the past 15 years I have lived a life that everyone around me believed was modest and unremarkable. People assumed I survived on my late husband's engineer pension and a carefully managed insurance policy. That assumption was intentional. It was exactly what I wanted them to believe. But on the day of my son's wedding, the careful disguise I had worn for so long was torn away in a single, irreversible moment. The wedding itself was stunning. My son, Ethan Hayes, 32 years old, looked happier than I had seen him in years as he waited at the altar for his bride, Lauren Miller. The Miller estate sprawled across acres of rolling Virginia hills, complete with a private chapel large enough to seat hundreds of guests. Every detail reflected wealth and meticulous planning. Lauren wore a gown that likely cost more than most people earned in a year, and her family radiated pride as they watched her walk down the aisle. I wore a simple navy dress, understated and elegant, paired with my grandmother's pearl necklace. To anyone watching, I was exactly what they expected, a respectable widow standing quietly on the margins of a grand celebration. That role had kept me safe for years. I had learned how to survive by remaining invisible. After the ceremony, the reception filled the ballroom with flowers, music, and flowing champagne. I stood near the back, watching Ethan and Lauren share their first dance as husband and wife. I assumed the evening would pass without incident. I was wrong. Lauren approached me with her parents at her side. Her voice was sweet but edged with the subtle confidence of someone who enjoyed displaying her status. "Mom, Dad," she said brightly, "this is Ethan's mother, Margaret Hayes." Her father, Charles Miller, turned toward me with polite curiosity. Then his expression shifted, his eyes narrowed, his mouth parted slightly, and he spoke words that seemed to freeze the air around us. "Margaret Hayes, aren't you the woman who sat on the acquisition board 3 years ago? The one who bought my company?" Nearby conversations faltered. Lauren's face drained of color. Her mother stared at me sharply. For the first time in years, I felt every gaze in the room searching my face for answers. I had spent years being invisible. In that instant, I was not invisible anymore. From the outside, my life looked simple, almost plain. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old sedan, and shopped at the same department store as my neighbors. My furniture was comfortable but ordinary. Anyone who visited me would leave believing I was carefully stretching a widow's pension. That impression was deliberate. Over time, I learned that the easiest way to protect secrets was to meet expectations. If you appear to be merely getting by, no one imagines you are quietly building something far larger. I had no desire for diamonds on my wrists or designer handbags on my shoulder. I valued the freedom of moving through the world without attracting attention. I often reminded myself of a story I once read about Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men alive, who still lived in the same house he had purchased decades earlier. His wealth wasn't measured by appearances, but by discipline and decisions. That philosophy became my guide. Even at Ethan's wedding, my pearl necklace wasn't chosen for its monetary worth. It had belonged to my grandmother, a symbol of the women before me who survived hardship with quiet resilience. My navy dress was selected to blend in, to allow me space to observe, to think, and to plan. Living this way had its costs. People frequently underestimated me. Some even pitied me, assuming I might need help as I aged. Lauren herself once asked, casually, almost kindly, whether I worried about my finances or if Ethan might need to support me someday. I smiled and let her believe whatever she wished. What none of them knew was that my modest appearance wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And for 15 years it had protected me, until Charles Miller recognized my name and began pulling the curtain back on the truth I had worked so carefully to hide. To understand how I arrived at that wedding carrying a secret fortune, you have to go back more than a decade. My late husband, Richard Hayes, was an engineer like me. We met in our 20s while working long hours at a tech company in Austin. He was brilliant, quiet, and endlessly curious. In 2010, after years of experimentation, Richard developed a power management system that dramatically extended cell phone battery life without increasing size. It was a small innovation that solved a massive problem. At first, we assumed it might allow us to retire a little earlier than planned, nothing extravagant. But when we sold the patent in 2012, the check arrived for $25 million. I remember staring at the figure, convinced it belonged to someone else. $25 million felt unreal, like stepping into a different universe. That very day, Richard and I made a decision that shaped everything that followed. We told Ethan we had received a comfortable payout, enough to take care of ourselves, but nothing more. We never shared the real number. Ethan was 24 at the time, fresh out of graduate school and eager to build his career in marketing. We wanted him to pursue his ambitions without the shadow of inherited wealth shaping his identity. With the money, Richard and I began cautiously. We invested in stable stocks and learned the rhythm of the markets. Gradually, we expanded into growth companies, real estate in promising neighborhoods, and eventually early-stage technology firms. Richard had an exceptional ability to see value where others saw only risk. I balanced his vision with discipline, researching every opportunity until I understood it completely. By 2015, our portfolio had doubled. By 2018, it had multiplied again, reaching $200 million. When Richard passed away suddenly in 2020, I was left with grief, memories, and a portfolio worth more than $700 million. Continuing without him was the hardest thing I had ever done. Still, I carried on, managing every investment with the same patience and care we had shared. Today, those careful decisions have grown our fortune to nearly $1 billion, a number so vast it feels abstract. But behind every dollar lies discipline, late nights studying financial reports, and a determination to secure the future we once envisioned together. Yet no one knew. To Ethan, to our neighbors, to Lauren's family, I was simply a widow living modestly. I wanted it that way. What good would come from people seeing me differently? What would it do to Ethan if he were judged as the son of a wealthy woman instead of for his own efforts? That balance mattered to me, and under the glittering lights of the wedding reception, that balance was suddenly at risk. When Charles Miller recognized me, I saw the change in Lauren's expression. She had always been polite, but there was a sharpness behind her smiles. Until that moment, she viewed me as harmless, easy to measure and dismiss. Now her gaze held something new, curiosity mixed with calculation. Lauren was ambitious. She had studied business at a prestigious school, spent summers working at her father's company, and once expected to inherit leadership of Miller Industries. That dream ended when I quietly acquired the company through an investment shell years earlier. Under professional management, the company flourished again, but it was no longer under Miller family control. To Lauren, I hadn't just been invisible, I had unknowingly taken the role she believed was meant for her. Ethan, meanwhile, believed deeply in building life on his own terms. He worked long hours, saved carefully, and built a strong reputation as a marketing manager, never suspecting his mother could have financed his entire world many times over. He believed Lauren admired him for his independence and character. Perhaps she did, but I began to suspect there was more. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Lauren had asked questions that now felt less innocent. Did I worry about retirement? Did I think Ethan might need to support me someday? At the time, I dismissed them as polite concern. Now I wasn't so sure. Charles's recognition had given her something to pursue. I saw it in her eyes. For someone like Lauren, information was opportunity, and the opportunity she saw wasn't love or unity, it was access. That night, I realized my greatest challenge was no longer protecting my fortune from outsiders. It was protecting my son from the ambitions of the woman he had just married. A few days after the wedding, Lauren invited Ethan and me to dinner. She had reserved a table at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, the kind where the wine list reads like a foreign language, and a single meal could cover a family's monthly rent. Ethan thought it was a kind gesture, a way for his new wife to bond with me. I knew better. When we arrived, Lauren was already seated. She wore a tailored suit I recognized from a recent business magazine spread. Her hair was immaculate, her smile polished and rehearsed. On the table sat a $1,000 bottle of Bordeaux she had ordered ahead of time. "Margaret, Ethan," she said warmly, standing to greet us. "I wanted to celebrate our new family." The waiter poured the wine. We exchanged pleasantries, but it didn't take long before Lauren reached for a folder beside her plate. Inside were neatly printed documents. Her voice grew confident, as if she had practiced every word. "I've been thinking about our family's future," she began. "We have a rare opportunity to build something lasting, a foundation managed together that provides security, privacy, and purpose." Ethan frowned. "A foundation?" "Yes," Lauren continued smoothly. "Imagine a family trust that combines our resources. You, me, and Margaret would all serve as trustees, each with equal voting power. It would allow us to coordinate investments, make charitable contributions, and manage wealth across generations." Her words were smooth, but the intention was clear. She wasn't talking about philanthropy or legacy. She was talking about control. I let her finish without interrupting, swirling the wine in my glass, as if this were nothing more than polite conversation. Ethan looked uncertain, caught between his loyalty to his wife and his respect for me. When Lauren paused, waiting for my response, I simply smiled. "That's an ambitious idea, dear," I said, "though perhaps a bit much for a casual family lunch, don't you think?" Her smile tightened. She wanted me to bite, to argue, to reveal something. Instead, I gave her nothing. But inside, I felt the first spark of a battle being lit. If Lauren thought she could trap me at a lunch table, she was about to learn I had been playing a much longer, more complex game than she could imagine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lauren's proposal had been too polished, too rehearsed. It wasn't a spontaneous idea shared over lunch. It was a plan carefully prepared. And if she had gone to the trouble of drafting documents, then she had already taken steps behind the scenes. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called James Porter, my longtime financial advisor. James had guided Richard and me through countless investments over the years. If there was anyone I trusted to dig into the Miller family's background, it was him. "Margaret," James said, when I explained the situation, "what you're describing sounds less like family planning and more like a financial takeover. If she's making moves this early, you need to be cautious." Within a week, James had a report ready. It was thicker than I expected, filled with numbers, charts, and correspondence. As I read through it, the picture became clear. The Miller family's lifestyle was built on a shaky foundation. Their estate was mortgaged up to 80% of its value. Their investment accounts had been drained to maintain appearances. Most of Charles Miller's income came from consulting contracts, quietly arranged by the new management of his former company, connections I had set in motion when I bought it. In other words, the family's comfort had been sustained by me all along, though they never realized it. But there was more. Lauren herself had opened several new lines of credit in the past month. The money had gone toward paying a private investigator, one who specialized in tracking corporate assets and unmasking anonymous investors. She had also made discreet inquiries with the law firm that handled estate disputes and family trusts. I closed the folder slowly. Lauren wasn't just curious, she was building a case. a case against me. What she didn't know was that I had built my life on preparation, and if she wanted to treat this like a chess game, she was already several moves behind. It didn't take long for Lauren to push the situation to the next level. 2 weeks after the wedding, Ethan told me we had been invited to a family meeting at her parents' office downtown. The invitation sounded polite, but the undertone was clear. This wasn't a dinner or a chat over coffee. This was a negotiation. When I arrived, the room was set like a boardroom from a corporate drama. A polished oak table, bottled water lined neatly in front of each chair, and folders stacked in the center. Lauren sat beside Ethan, her posture confident, while her parents, Charles and Diane Miller, took seats across from me. A man in a sharp gray suit introduced himself as Mark Benson, their attorney. Mark cleared his throat and spoke first.
Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming. We're here today to discuss a financial structure that ensures fairness and transparency for everyone in this family. Lauren slid a folder toward me. It's a proposal, she said smoothly, a family trust. We believe $15 million would be an appropriate initial contribution from you. With equal voting rights among the trustees, myself, Ethan, and you, we could guide investments in charitable giving together. I didn't even open the folder. 15 million, I repeated, as though tasting the words. Ethan looked overwhelmed, shifting in his chair. Lauren, maybe this is moving too fast. Lauren ignored him. This isn't about speed, it's about vision. Our family could build something extraordinary if we start now. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly. Lauren, before we move forward, I think there are some other documents we should consider. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder of my own, one James had prepared. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Her confident expression faltered. Inside were copies of her recent credit lines, her payments to a private investigator, and her inquiries with an estate law firm. I let the silence settle before speaking again. You've been busy, I said quietly, investigating me, preparing legal strategies, borrowing money you expect to pay back once you gain access to mine. Ethan's face drained of color as he turned toward his wife. Lauren, is this true? Lauren stammered. I was only trying to understand what was really happening with the family's finances. I looked at each of them in turn. You wanted transparency. Here it is. I know about your debts, your investigations, and your intentions. If you believe this meeting gives you leverage, you're mistaken, because this isn't your boardroom, it's mine. The silence after my words was heavy. For a long moment, no one moved. Ethan sat frozen between us, his eyes shifting from his wife to me. Lauren's polished confidence had cracked. Her parents avoided my gaze. Their attorney shuffled papers but said nothing. I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady. This ends one of two ways. Either you withdraw every investigation, every legal complaint, and every attempt to meddle in my affairs, or we let this escalate. And believe me, you don't want to see how far I'm willing to go. Lauren opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. In return for your silence, I'll give you $5 million. One payment, no strings. After that, you will never contact me or my son again. Ethan blinked. Mom, $5 million? You can't be serious. I am, I said firmly. This isn't about generosity, it's about clarity. If Lauren married you for love, then she won't care about money. If she married you for wealth, then she'll take the deal. Either way, you'll finally have your answer. Lauren's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She glanced at him, then at her parents, who were already calculating behind their composed expressions. $5 million, she repeated slowly, as if weighing the words on her tongue. Yes, I said. $5 million now or nothing later. The choice is yours. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner. In that silence, I saw it clearly. The battle lines had been drawn, and I had just placed an ultimatum on the table that would decide not only my future, but my son's as well.
The following days passed in intense silence. Ethan stayed in his apartment, answering my calls with short sentences, clearly torn between loyalty and confusion. Lauren, on the other hand, vanished from sight. When she finally resurfaced, it was through her attorney. She had accepted my offer. $5 million transferred into an account of her choosing in exchange for permanent separation from our lives. The paperwork was signed swiftly, too swiftly, almost as if she had been waiting for this exact outcome. Ethan filed for divorce soon after, citing irreconcilable differences. His face looked older, lined with disappointment and betrayal. He admitted he had seen signs, but never wanted to believe them. Now he couldn't unsee. For weeks, Ethan avoided me. He needed space, he said, to process the truth, not only about his wife, but about me. 15 years of silence weighed on him. He confessed that part of his anger wasn't only about Lauren. It was about discovering that his entire life had been built beside a secret I had kept hidden. I let him speak without defending myself. Sometimes silence is the only answer a parent can give, because explanations can sound like excuses. I wanted Ethan to know I hadn't lied out of distrust. I had hidden the truth to give him freedom. Little by little, he began to understand. One evening, he called and said, "Mom, I think I get it now. You didn't want me to inherit comfort. You wanted me to inherit resilience." His words felt like sunlight breaking through after a storm. The wound wasn't healed, not yet, but there was hope. Lauren was gone and the marriage was over, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan and I were beginning to rebuild what mattered most, our trust. Months passed, and life slowly began to take shape again. I sold the apartment where Richard and I had lived for decades. It was filled with memories, both beautiful and painful, but it also carried the weight of secrets. I needed a fresh start. I moved to Santa Fe, a place that had always pulled at my heart with its art, its desert skies, and its quiet rhythm of life. There, no one knew me as the mysterious investor or the wealthy widow. I was simply Margaret, a woman in her 60s who liked to walk through the farmer's market and talk to local artists. I also started something new, the Richard Fund, named in honor of my late husband. It provided scholarships for young engineers from working-class families who dreamed of patenting their ideas but lacked the means. Watching these students present their projects full of hope and determination gave me more satisfaction than any profit margin ever had. For once, my money wasn't just numbers on a page, it was possibility made real in someone else's hands. Ethan and I needed time to heal, but slowly we found our way back. There were dinners marked by silence and moments when old frustrations surfaced. But then came a turning point. Ethan introduced me to someone new. Her name was Claire, a teacher with kind eyes and a laugh that filled a room. When he told her his mother lived in a modest apartment and drove an old sedan, she smiled and said, "She sounds like a woman who knows her priorities." In that instant, I knew my son had finally found what he deserved. That Christmas, for the first time in years, my table was filled with genuine laughter. No hidden agendas, no comparisons, no masks, just family, cocoa, and carols sung slightly off-key. Looking back, I realized something important. The greatest wealth wasn't the $1 billion I managed or the companies I invested in. It was the ability to choose peace, to live authentically, and to leave a legacy of integrity. Real revenge wasn't destroying Lauren or her ambitions. Real revenge was thriving without her shadow. And so I chose to step out of invisibility, not by flaunting riches, but by embracing a life where my value was measured not in dollars, but in presence.